Mulholland Drive has long been home to Hollywood elite such as Madonna, John Legend, and Jack Nicholson. But beyond the glitz and glamour, this iconic road was also home to some of the most incredible underground street racing in the country. Above the lights of Los Angeles, people from all walks of life came to compete. There were ingenious enthusiasts like Chris Banning and his Chop 911, movie stars like James Dean and Steve McQueen, and enigmatic daredevils like Crazy Charlie. While some dream of winning an F1 championship or claiming victory at Le Mans, the competitors here dedicated themselves to the 1.8-mile stretch, trying to cement their claim as king of the mountain, before disappearing into the shadows to escape the police. The real characters and cars that once roared through this legendary road have sparked numerous films, books, and video games over the years. This is a story of stars and speed, of cliffs and cuffs, and of outlaws and obsession. This is the story of the quest to become King of the Mountain. This story begins with William Mulholland himself, a man known to many as the father of Los Angeles. After running away from his home in Ireland at 14, he would eventually end up in LA, a city which only had 9,000 people at the time. The limiting factor was water, and Mulholland just so happened to find a job working as a zanjero, basically a ditch digger who helped make sure the water got to where it had to go. He worked his way up the ranks, eventually becoming the superintendent of Los Angeles Water Department. From 1890 to 1900, the population doubled, and in the next decade it tripled, all the way to 320,000 people. To continue to grow, Mulholland and the mayor carried out some ethically dubious plans, shrouded in lies to secure water rights from Owens Valley. Then, Mulholland built the 233-mile-long aqueduct, which used gravity alone to drain the lake all the way to Los Angeles, robbing the water and livelihood from farmers and ranchers. There was some rebellion, and chunks of the aqueduct were even blown up with dynamite. But Mulholland didn't have much sympathy, and instead took pride in his accomplishment of growing LA into the biggest city in the country. They named schools after him, a dam, and the road Mulholland Drive. The chief engineer behind the road was Dewitt Rayburn, who had also worked on the aqueduct. The goal was to create not just the most scenic road in the country, but also the best to drive on too. It opened to the public in 1924, and it wasn't long before people began testing themselves and their cars on the equally beautiful and dangerous stretch. Some of the earliest accounts of racing included silver screen stars like John Carradine and Gary Cooper, who would finish filming in Hollywood, then go race their Duesenbergs at Mulholland Drive. A bit later, there was Dick Goldstrand, the man known as Mr. Corvette himself, due to his work on advancing the American icon. His parents wanted him to become a lawyer, but instead he found himself running away from the law while testing on the mountain pass. The police didn't stand a chance, as Goldstrand could drive and even race at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, although the team forgot a trailer and had to drive the race car all the way from Paris to Le Mans, trying to keep the car above its minimum speed of 70 miles per hour. Despite all of his racing experiences, Goldstrand still loved driving at Mulholland, and he wasn't alone, with some people even trailering their race cars out to compete for the night. More and more drivers began sneaking out to race, and at the center of it all was Chris Banning. Chris grew up right on Mulholland Drive, watching enthusiasts speed by his home. He started driving the road at 12 years old in his mom's 1966 V8 Mustang, and when he was old enough, he bought a Fiat 850 Spider as his first car, which he painted lime green. He upgraded through a number of cars, including a 911T his mom was supposed to drive, but the transmission was too stiff, so he helped her break it in first. Of course, Chris was extremely familiar with the course, as was his friend John Hall, who managed to win races against out-of-town challengers in his underpowered Volkswagen.
He had a little Volkswagen, and I saw him spank a Corvette one night in that little Volkswagen.
The racers were always looking for new competitors, and some handed out business cards to entice enthusiasts to their underground racetrack. Some even profited from the races, like Bart, who would goad inexperienced drivers into racing his pickup truck, and then charge $40 to rescue their cars when they inevitably crashed. Chris was getting fast and upgraded again, this time to a hopped-up Porsche 911S. He was beating up on everyone and felt unstoppable.
I'd already beaten everybody up there, so I thought my head was pretty inflated.
But then, while cooling down the car one night, a 1951 GMC pickup flew by him with no headlights on. It was Crazy Charlie. Charles Francis Voigt loved the outdoors, hunting, panning for gold, his pet reptiles, and of course, racing. He lived his life on the edge and had the scars to show for his dangerous driving. Many close friends vouched for how incredible Charlie was, both as a friend and as a driver. But to others, he was Crazy Charlie, an enigma, a ghost of Mulholland Pass, and the undisputed king of the mountain. He spent his free time chasing down drivers like Chris while enjoying a beer, then tossing out the empty cans at the competition as he blew by them. Chris stepped on the gas to catch the old truck, but was surprised at how fast it was through the turns, using all of the road with little regard for oncoming traffic.
Basically, a race to the death, and I was shocked that someone would actually race to the death like that.
He'd heard rumors that the more Charlie drank, the faster he got, and whether true or not, there was no denying how quick he was. Chris nearly flipped his car trying to keep up, terrifying his passenger.
He never got in a car with me again after that evening. He even today, he won't do it. He won't get in the car with me.
But he did just barely manage to catch the truck on the longest straight of the course and maintain some shred of his pride. However, he knew that Charlie had a race car, one that he had never lost in, and one he now knew would embarrass him in his Porsche, a 1965 Corvette. Charlie worked at a garage in Hollywood, where he tinkered on vehicles owned by stars such as Steve McQueen and the stuntman Bud Eakins, most well known for making a 60-foot motorcycle jump in The Great Escape. Charlie even worked on some of Chris's cars a few times, but most of his efforts went into his big block 427 Corvette, with the stripped interior and fender flares to house large racing slicks. He even got some help from Mr. Corvette himself, Dick Goldstrand, when building the car. Compared to his truck, the Corvette was on another level, and Charlie realized that if he wanted to challenge the king of the mountain, he'd have to make some big changes, and one of the first steps was learning German. This was part of Chris's plan to build the ultimate race car, one that was built with the sole purpose of racing the 1.8 miles of Mulholland Drive and nothing else. Again, he started with a 911 as a base, this time a 1974, but instead of building it up, first the chassis was taken down, dropped into an acid bath to melt away over 300 pounds in weight. The roof was also chopped down, allowing the front windshield to be leaned back 3.5 inches, trading some headroom to make the car more aerodynamic. This was all strengthened by an aluminum roll cage, fabricated by a man who did work for the Department of Defense. To compete with the Corvette, Chris also wanted some big slicks, and managed to find some wheels off an International Race of Champions race car. To fit them on, the 911 had the fenders put on from a turbo. The engine was a 2.8 liter from an RSR, which is also where the suspension came from. And to make the most of it, Chris learned German so that he could travel to Germany and learn from the experts at Porsche. Once he landed in London, he managed to find his way to Amsterdam, where he bought a blue Beetle from an older gentleman to make the trip to Stuttgart. He met with a lady named Johanna Baer, who showed some of the incredible cars and projects at Porsche. While walking along, Chris told her about how unique Mulholland was, and that he needed a setup that could accelerate quickly out of the sharp turns and handle the bumps on the short straights. Johanna said that she had the answer, and led him to a giant vault, secured by what looked like a bank door. Inside were the results of decades of Porsche research. She grabbed a variety of books for Chris, from an original RSR owner's manual to the technical documents necessary to set up the car for his needs. Thanks to this incredibly generous gesture, Chris was armed with everything he needed to finish setting up his ultimate Mulholland race car. He managed to sell the Beetle back to the original owner, then flew home to Mulholland Drive. After the setup was complete, the car was more dominant than ever, and racked up thousands of miles without ever leaving the short stretch of road it had been built to dominate. Stories about the custom-built Porsche race car began circulating, and the media soon moved in, trying to learn more about the unique underground racing scene. It wasn't long before the police showed up in force too, trying to put an end to the racing. The regulars all knew the area like the back of their hand, and some would even turn off their headlights to aid their escape.
Almost everybody I know ran from the cops on Mulholland because they couldn't keep up with the racers. Not in their big, heavy LTDs or whatever they're driving.
Chris had also had good luck avoiding the law, as without plates, he could easily escape into the night. But as more police cars and helicopters began showing up, it was becoming increasingly difficult. And one night, his luck nearly ran out when cops recognized the car while it was parked.
Well, as soon as they see my silver car, the searchlight goes off. And I go, uh-oh.
The officers approach the Porsche.
Now they're right behind me and they're black and white, and there's two of them, and they're going to come get me. And I'm sitting there shivering in my boots.
And right before they saw him, in a moment of fight or flight, Chris took off.
I turned the ignition off, and I dumped the clutch. I tack it to 8 and dump it. The front end lifted up. My headlights went up in the air, like I'm doing a wheelie or something.
The front of the car was damaged from hitting a dip while exiting, before he sped home and parked the car in the living room of his house, hiding it away just before police combed through his neighborhood. Through all of this, Chris had built quite the reputation, but he couldn't claim King of the Mountain as he hadn't raced Charlie, who had also been laying low with the increased police pressure. In an interview, Charlie mentioned that he'd be interested in racing Chris and the Porsche if he happened to come upon them some night. However, for better or worse, it didn't look like that was going to happen. Many yearned to see the race though, and so that became the plot for the movie, aptly named King of the Mountain. In the 1981 film, Harry Hamlin plays Steve, a character similar to Chris, although instead of a 911, he drives a highly tuned 356 Speedster. Dennis Hopper plays the rival, a man named Cal who is extremely similar to how many viewed Charlie. He's the past King of the Mountain, a drunken madman who terrorizes the other drivers in his old truck before bringing out his prize Corvette for the final race against the Porsche. In the finale, Steve decides that he doesn't want to risk his life for the title anymore, and lets Cal go on to reclaim his crown, before Cal, finally victorious, becomes victim to the dangerous road moments later. While filming, apparently Dennis Hopper would take out a 6-pack of beer with him while recording in the car and return with nothing but empty bottles. The film didn't perform very well at the box office, with viewers complaining it just looked like flashlights in the night. But it did springboard more racing films and the careers of many of the actors in it. The movie also heavily increased the amount of drivers coming out to race at Mulholland. From 1980 to 82, there were over 140 injuries and 4 deaths as police struggled to deter the racers. Chris still didn't feel it was safe to bring out the 911 after his last escape, and didn't want to damage his prized possession at the track either, so instead he got a modified 1967 Camaro for SCCA racing.
I painted the car red. It had fender flares, had 10-inch wheels, front and back. Car looked dynamite.
One day, he brought it out to Mulholland for a light cruise, but felt something was wrong.
This gut feeling that I was too far from home. I just felt like unsafe for some reason.
It turned out someone named Daryl had been causing havoc in a newer Camaro, and when an officer saw Chris, he called for reinforcements. 2
police cars in a V formation blocking Mulholland with their guns drawn, ready to nail me because they thought I was Daryl. And all these guys were running at me with their arms up in the air, flailing, "Get out of here, get out of here." They're all screaming at me, and I'm thinking, gee, what's wrong with everybody? They're after you, the cops are right behind you. And then I looked back and I could see lights and sirens, and they're going to nail me, and they're probably going to arrest me for sure, and they're going to shred my car. And I was like totally unaware this was even happening, and I went, uh-oh.
Again, Chris managed to escape, but felt he wasn't able to bring out the Camaro anymore now either, and eventually sold it. The road was becoming more dangerous for everyone involved, but especially out-of-town drivers who were constantly getting into serious accidents. One of the most tragic happened at 1:30 a.m. on a Sunday, when a 12-year-old boy was hit before the driver fled the scene. The city adopted an emergency ordinance and closed down segments of Mulholland. This also happened just days after Chris had escaped in the Camaro. On top of this, Charlie also passed away. Not on Mulholland, but on Vasquez Canyon Road, doing what he loved most, driving fast. Still, some continued to race, like Chuck Turner, who had his car impounded so frequently the yard would just leave it out so he could pay the fee and go straight back to racing.
He would go down and bail his car out, pay the fee, and then go back to Mulholland the same night and race on Mulholland even longer.
He also had an unusual tactic for avoiding jail time.
What was he doing? And the cops would say, well, he was in the back seat naked with a young lady. Well, he gets run out of court every time.
But even Chuck eventually gave up too and moved away to Hawaii, where he worked as a photographer for Hustler magazine. Chris decided to step back for good and build a metal shed to store the 911, which managed to survive an earthquake that destroyed Chris's house in 1994. For many years, he kept the car hidden away as he moved on to other projects, including an eclectic car collection and over 4,000 cacti. Then, in 2007, a thread was created on the Pelican Parts forum, asking what happened to the Mulholland King of the Hill RSR. The replies were incredible, as past residents and racers, still avid Porsche enthusiasts, commented on their experiences. Today, the thread is at 378 pages, with over 7,500 replies and over 1.5 million views. The thread sparked Chris to restore the 911 and once again bring it out, still with battle scars, for the world to see.
A smooth start every time.
Thanks to this, the car was recently put on display at the Peterson Automotive Museum to showcase a piece of this amazing story to the public. For nearly 100 years now, Mulholland Drive has inspired multiple movies, video games, books, and even a special edition Singer Porsche. It continues to entice enthusiasts to this day, but I strongly discourage anyone from driving beyond the limit, racing there, or on any public roads. The steep cliffs have claimed many lives in cars over the years in tragic accidents, with some as recent as just last week. Mulholland Drive is a dangerous and beautiful stretch of road, but what makes it so special are the communities that formed around it, the rivalries, the friendships, and the dedication to maintaining such an incredible piece of history. This video barely scratches the surface, but if you want to learn more about the tales of past racers, I recommend first diving into the thread on the Pelican Parts forum. Chris Banning also wrote a book called The Mulholland Experience, which has loads of insight if you can get your hands on a copy, and he's been working away at a new book, which will be even more complete. I want to thank all the enthusiasts, writers, and historians who've shared their experiences for making this video possible. And of course, Chris, who took a couple hours out of his day to share his wild stories with me over the phone just a few days ago. He mentioned that when the car is back from the Peterson Museum, we could maybe go for a quick jaunt on Mulholland, so there might be an addendum to this video one day. While Chris learned German to help build his 911, you can further your own skill set to build your dream car or advance your career opportunities for free with Brilliant. Brilliant makes learning fun and engaging, with thousands of interactive lessons and new ones added each month. Whether you want to learn about AI and computer science to qualify for a new job, or some engineering lessons to set up your own car for cruising Mulholland, Brilliant has you covered. When I'm not making videos, I work as a researcher for a university, but I still have a lot to learn and have been using Brilliant to further my data analysis skills to get more out of our trials. I'm actually out of the country right now for work at a robotics conference, although I have zero background in engineering or robotics. Thankfully, Brilliant helped me prepare, and I feel like I've caught up enough to hold my own in some of the conversations here and arm myself with new ideas for my own research, robots, and car builds for the future. If you're like me and are learning completely new skills, or maybe you're already an expert, Brilliant has a wide range of lessons depending on where you're at and what you're trying to achieve. Right now, you can try everything Brilliant has to offer free for 30 days at brilliant.org/huntersmoon. The first 200 people to use the link can also get 20% off the annual premium subscription. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching the video and supporting the channel. I really hope you enjoyed this one and that you have a great day.